dial in the sound.
Yeah, and if you're not satisfied, you just start over.
I noticed on the swamp amps, the sound is a Fender-y sound. It's the best way to explain it. It's a Fender-y sound.
Yes.
But it doesn't seem to have some of the loss that Fenders do. People like Fenders because the mids maybe stand out higher. It complements a Strat, but I find from what I've heard, and when I played through the swamp here, that amp supports single coils as well as humbuckers. The old adage used to be you match up a Gibson guitar with a Fender amp or a Fender guitar with a Gibson amp. And that's not, really the case with your amp. You can put anything through it and it's going to complement it in a different way but have a really, really good sound. And the clean tone on the swamp amp is stellar. The reverb as well. I'd like to talk a little bit about the reverb. I mean, I have a Carbon Legacy amp and the reverb is horrible. I can't even put it on one without the actual reverberation of the amp bouncing the spring around and it sounding like total garbage. I can turn the reverb on my Silver Hammer Up, or you did on the Swamp, to 50 or 60%, and it sounds stellar. It's incredible.
It does work as it's supposed to. By the way, on the Silver Hammer, the reverb on the Silver Hammer is completely different than any other reverb. It goes right off the first tube stage.
Okay.
It's a little teeny weeny squeaky signal that's amplified all the way through the amp, and that's the way that it works in a British amp.
Okay.
It makes a difference.
Right.
It's not starting out where the distortion is. It just works its way in. Say it that way. As far as the Swamp is concerned, I copped a few things from Fender on that because their Fender reverb. Fender makes a good reverb. I like it. I've always liked it, and I just modified it a little bit and changed a couple capacitors. Minor changes is what I'm saying, and I didn't do it because I wanted to change their reverb. I did it because my circuitry is slightly different. It still sounds like a Fender because it's not that far removed from a Fender. It is what I would. This whole thing started as a Bassman on steroids.
Right, right.
And it's still that way, except that with the reverb and everything, it tones it down a little bit, and it moves it probably closer to a twin.
And it's a stellar clean. It doesn't even start to break up until you swing the volume up to what, about at least 8.
It will stay clean unless you use the master volume, and this is the big area on the Swamp, and it's a big area on any clean sound amp. When you get into a British amp, it'll start to sing. You take the master volume down, and you keep your bass strings. They stay there. But when you get into the clean amps, not a high gain amplifier, it's a difficult job to keep the strings from getting spongy on the bottom,
right,
or starting to fret out, or audibly fret out, not technically fret out. And it's a real balancing act to get that, and I worked a long time on it, and the Swamp does hold together. With no pedals or anything, you can still get a good raunchy Stevie Ray sound out of the Swamp.
Right.
And there's another interesting thing too, by having the natural sound not all being created by the distortion master. You can feed something in just as a matter of clean dBs in the front end with the pedal with no distortion, and the amp will sing. And that, I think, is a big plus. And that's what I was really solving for, and I did finally find it. And I want to emphasize that it took me a long time to get there.
A very, very pedal-friendly amp. As we can see, too, you have many amps in various stages of implementation at this time. And how many Swamps do you figure you've built since you started?
Not very many. 3 or 4 a year. There's probably 30 or 40 out there.
Out there so far?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't advertise. I work word of mouth. I work alone. I make everything except the tubes and the transformers, uh, capacitors, but the sheet metal, the wood, oh, and the reverb tanks, I don't make those, and the components, but I I started this when I had a full-time job, and I got into it a little bit more in '92 when I retired, and I've been building ever since. And sometimes I get real busy and I get behind, and people have to wait 5 or 6 weeks for an amp. Other times I can have one out in a week or 2 weeks, depending on how many interruptions I have. Since there's only one of me, people stop in unannounced from almost anywhere.
Right.
They might be on vacation, you know.
Well, there's not very many places you can call the actual person that built your amp for you and talk to them directly about problems that are going on, or needing to have it fixed or upgraded, or the next amp that you want. You just can't go into the store and do that for anything, let alone a guitar amp. And the guys that are building boutique amps out there usually are only servicing professional working musicians and charging anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 a unit. The ones that are copying those and put them in mass production, like Dr. Z, are $2,500, $3,500 an amp, and then it's a mass production amp. It's not exactly put together by the guy who wrote the circuit anyway. So
that can happen, and you know, you mentioned something there that's really important to me. One of the biggest benefits I've got out of this is from people all over the United States, and I have friends that I've never met.
Right.
They call just to talk. I call them from time to time, see how they're doing. They've had their amp for 20 or 30 years. Number one is still being played. That was built in '78, right, by a player right here in Eaton Rapids, Michigan.
Right. That's awesome.
And the thing about it is, I like to talk about guitars and amps. And people call, and I talk with them, and they're playing Wagners or Marshalls, or doesn't matter.
Right.
It's not important to me. I didn't go into this business with the idea of a business. I just built my own amp.
You went into you're interested in it, you were passionate about it.
It's my passion.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I've met so many nice people. There's players down in New Orleans, Dallas, Nashville, and they're party animals. They're one of me. You know? We're musician types.
Right.
And I like to talk to them, and if they have a problem, I like to talk to them about that. I learn from these people.
Right.
What they like, what they don't like, the amps that they don't like, and what they don't like about the amps.
Right.
And the guitars too. And I still play, and I'm always changing pickups and tinkering just like so many of the people that I work with. And most of them are playing musicians. They're professionals. But I'm not into that boutique area where I charge a lot of money, and I don't ever expect to be.
Right. Well, you can't get the quality of the amplifier you're building for the money you're charging from anyone else. I can tell you that. That's the God's truth.
That. A lot of people just think I'm dumb.
No, not at all. You can tell you have the passion for it because you're barely recouping the money that you put into it for building the amps on hours alone. There's not really any profit built into these at all.
And the best part about it is, when I started building, the first ones I built in '78 were $475.
Oh my gosh.
And now they're $1,000.
Right.
But that's an equivalency.
Right.
They never really went up.
It's cost of the parts. It's not the cost. It's not anything you've raised because of your time.
Some of the stuff has really gone up.
Yeah.
And freight is the big item.
Right, to ship.
Especially for transformers.
Exactly. Well, next time we'll have to talk about some of the people that you've met and the amps that you built for people. That'll have to be a story for another day, but you've got some really good stories you've told me about people you've met along the way. Oh yeah, there has been some nice people, and I haven't been in with very many big time people, but the ones that I have worked with have been. You wouldn't even know they were rock and roll stars. Say it that way, or country stars. Right.
They're just nice people.
Right.
And before we get into that, I'll just tell you one of the funnest people that I was ever around was the Boxcar Willie bunch.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Those guys were real, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and I built an amp several years ago for Chuck Jennings, who is their player or was their player, and spent some time with them, and they played classic country, one of the few bands that still was doing it, and they were good people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll pick that up and a couple other stories next time, but it's been really good talking to you. I'll be glad to put this interview on the web because I haven't seen any interviews in video with you personally out there at all, so this may be, in fact, the first one.
Well, tell all my friends hello.
Will do.
They finally get a look at me. There really is a Max up there in Eaton Rapids, Michigan.
Oh, thanks a lot, Max.
You bet.